So welcome everyone tonight to tonight's virtual event with Brookline Booksmith, featuring Dr. Paul Koudounaris and featuring not only a cameo, but a very calm presence from his famous and beautiful and very well-dressed cat, Baba, for his book, A Cat's Tale, A Journey Through Feline History. My name is Alex. I'm the events director at Brookline Booksmith in Brookline, Mass. You may be familiar with our store, in which case, welcome back. If this is the first time you've ever heard of us, welcome. We're really happy to have you as part of our community this evening. And we appreciate the support that you're showing authors and an independent bookstore by coming to our events and buying books from us. Just in case you need a bit of a tour of Zoom, the chat and question box are both open. You can find those at the bottom of your Zoom window. Please feel free to type any questions that you have into that Q&A box. That's where they'll be best seen. And we're going to try to get to those with a Q&A at the end of the event. So as soon as a question pops into your head, go ahead and put it in there. Otherwise, feel free to use the chat. Make sure that it's set to all panelists or attendees, or you'll just be talking to me and the author, and we shall not answer you. So if you'd like to talk between each other, make sure you have it set that way. Please note that Brookline Booksmith does have a strict policy against abusive behavior and language, and our discretion, any attendee can be removed from an event for partaking in such behavior. Now, I'm pretty sure everybody knows why they're here, but as a quick introduction to tonight's guests, Dr. Paul Koudounaris has a PhD in art history from UCLA and an international speaking career, and he is one of the world's most popular historians of the eccentric, ephemeral, and macabre. A beloved fixture in the cat appreciation community, he's annually a speaker at the world's largest cat convention, CatCon, with more than 20,000 attendees. Baba is a domestic short-haired tabby with a love for adventure and history. Despite weighing in at less than 9 pounds, she is big on the inside and never has any cat or human stood in the way of her getting what she wants. Born to the rough streets of Los Angeles and educated in the School of Hard Knocks, she was interred in the city's animal shelter at a young age, only to be discovered there by her human co-author. She started modeling 5 years ago and has since graced websites and publications across the world, with several of her images being exhibited in gallery shows and printed as posters. I'm really excited to be part of tonight's talk. I'm going to perhaps controversially take this stance that not only are all animals valid, but all animals are good. However, it's 4 cats that I live with now, and while I don't show them respect when they fall off the couch or have hysterics because squirrels exist, I do respect their history, their legacy, and their all-around goodness. So it's a pleasure to have Dr. Paul Koudounaris here tonight with Baba. Please give him your best chat welcome.
Hi, everybody. I am here with my esteemed co-author. I'll probably be doing most of the talking, but we'll see if she has anything to say. We're here in support of our book, A Cat's Tale, and I want to mention that we have a little bit of surprise for you, because if you did buy your book from the store, you will also, in addition to getting a autographed book, you'll be getting a little vinyl sticker of Baba as a really pretty Parisian woman. That will be coming to you in the mail along with your book or when you pick it up. I'd like to start by doing a little bit of an overview of what the book is, since none of you have had a chance to read it yet. Well, A Cat's Tale is a feline history told in a cat's voice, in Baba's voice, with her as the narrator. And of course, it leads you through historical periods. It starts in prehistoric times, leads you through the glory days of ancient Egypt. It traces cats' migration from across Asia Minor and into East Asia, up through the Mediterranean, with the Romans, with the Greeks, and into Northern Europe. It talks about the bad days when cats were not liked, when they were associated with the witch trials and considered to be servants of the devil. Their rebound during the Enlightenment, where cats once again started to be appreciated in Europe, and then it finishes off by crossing the oceans and seeing how cats populated Australia, New Zealand, and the United States to become our beloved friends again, just as they were in ancient times. But what I wanted to do tonight, since the store is in Massachusetts, Massachusetts is in New England, and New England actually is one of the great early cat centers in the United States. I wanted to talk a little bit about cats in New England before I get into some of the information from the book, because you New Englanders have a reason to be proud about your love of cats. This image that I'm showing is a grave of a cat in Dedham, Massachusetts, and it's of great historical importance. It's also my most stolen photograph ever, which is really saying something, but I think that's because it really has a way of touching people. A cat who died in 1910. He was only a cat, this woman says, but he was human enough to be a great comfort in hours of loneliness and pain. A grave for a beloved cat died in 1910 by a widow whose husband had been killed in a tragic naval accident. This is of great historical importance, not just because it touches us emotionally and lets us know that people a century ago were capable of loving cats the way that we do, but also because it was America's first public monument to the love of a feline. And again, right there in Massachusetts. And there's a reason why that would be so, because some of America's great early cat lovers were in fact New Englanders, such as Mark Twain when he lived in Connecticut. He had a bunch of cats, and his famous quote, "If a man could be crossed with a cat, it would improve the man, but deteriorate the cat." Another great New Englander, H.P. Lovecraft, also among the great early American lovers of cats. And his great pro-feline quote, "The cat is for the man who appreciates beauty as the one living force in a blind and purposeless universe." New England really was the center of early American cat culture at the turn of the century, early 20th century. So much so, in fact, that the Boston Post started the first column in any American newspaper, and actually in any newspaper in the world. The first continuous column about cats was in Boston. The Boston Post in 1920 started a column, so a century ago, called The Famous Cats of New England. And every week, they would introduce you to a new cat in New England who had done some wonderful, stupendous thing. And this column ran for a few years and eventually became syndicated around the country, even in places that weren't in New England, to kind of let other Americans know how wonderful cats could be. I'll introduce you to some of those famous early New England cats. This cat, Minnie, was owned by a fire company, and she was the only cat who won the Famous Cats of New England twice. Why twice? Because she died and came back to life. Hold on, you want to know how? No, she's not Christ. Minnie had been found in a burning building by a group of New England firemen, and they took her charred body. They thought she was dead. They took her back on their fire truck. But then, before they disposed of the body, they heard a faint mew, and they realized that this badly injured cat was not dead the way they thought. This cat was actually still alive, and these firemen nursed her back to health. And when she became strong and whole again, they made her the mascot of their fire company in 1920. Why is that such an incredibly big deal historically? Well, hold on. Early fire companies, what did they all have? They all had dogs, especially Dalmatians, but Ladder Company 24, they had a fire cat. Another of these famous New England cats, hold on, we just skipped a slide. Another of these famous New England cats was a cat by the name of Bosie. You see his picture right here. He lived at the Macaulay Hat Company, and the reason he was considered a famous cat of New England is he liked to hide in paper bags. Wow, every cat likes to hide in a paper bag, right? It's funny about this because, again, this was 1920, and even in New England, where cats were popular, way more popular than other parts of the country, they really didn't understand feline behavior. Hiding in a paper bag is actually nothing, but it got Bosie in the newspaper. Then later in the article, they mentioned something that should have been headline news. Bosie liked to run across the room on his hind legs, trying to catch flies with his front paws. That's what made Bosie unique, but he got in the paper because he liked to hide in a paper bag. This cat, this little tabby, wound up, you see how it says underneath something about a 12-year record? He never stole anything in 12 years, according to the newspaper. Well, again, cats had a very bad reputation if they're thought to be thieves inherently. Let's talk a little bit about why, and about why this cat worship in New England by the 1920s was really such a big deal and such a turning point. Okay, there had been cats in the United States and in New England actually for a very long time. Cats had crossed the ocean from Europe in the age of exploration. And so those early ships that landed on the East Coast, that landed in places like New England or Virginia, they had cats on them as settlers as well as humans. Why were cats on those ships? Well, cats had always been sailing on ships in order to prevent mice from eating the stores. Mice and rats could destroy an entire crew if they got into one of those barrels of preserved items and spoiled the whole barrel. So cats had to be on ships. You had to have a ship's cat to patrol for the mice, but when you had ships that were only going one way, like in the age of exploration carrying colonists, those cats were found in colonies as well. Some of the great early ship cats' names are in fact preserved, and we'll talk about them in the book. There's an entire chapter in the book about nautical cats. One of the most famous, we see a statue to him right here. Well, a statue to his human, but the cat's there as well. His name was Trim, and he sailed with Captain Matthew Flinders. They were the first man and cat to circumnavigate Australia, and Trim was said to help map the continent. Well, wait a minute, isn't that giving him a little more credit than he deserves, a cat mapping the continent? You know, these cats had come on the ships. One of the points we make about the book is how underestimated their abilities really are. They had come on the ships in order to patrol for mice and rats, but there was so much more that they could do. For instance, a cat was thought to be able to predict the weather. And I know that sounds a little wacky, but actually their senses are so much better than humans. They might sense, especially when they had very primitive meteorological instruments, a cat might sense a change in barometric pressure before a human. And it was said that a sailor who could read his cat was always kind of a step ahead on things like understanding the weather, things like that. And they had been on ships all along. You know, we kind of don't really appreciate how important they were to sailors, but cats were in ships through World War I, continuing to serve with crews. I'm going to show you a couple of great pictures right over here. These are two ship cats in their hammocks sleeping on a British naval vessel. So the sailors had made little hammocks for these cats to stay in, to sleep in, because they had loved their cats so much. They wanted them to be comfortable. Cats were still on ships even in World War II. They stayed on ships for a very long time. This is the ID card of the Coast Guard's mouser. His name was Herman the cat, expert mouser. And back in World War II, if you wanted to enter the port of Baltimore, you had to present an ID, right? Because we don't want any Nazi cats getting into the port. And so this was Herman's ID card with his paw print on it. When we think of battle and we think of animals at war, we tend to think of dogs, especially, and horses also. We don't understand the role that cats played. Felines, in fact, have a long history, even in battle. Again, it's one of the things that Baba, as the narrator, tries to do in this book, is to recover not just the importance of their historical roles, but how wonderfully they served. The animal in World War II for the United States that received more medals and more citations from the Navy than any other was in fact a cat, not a dog. Pooley, a cat born in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, who later retired to Los Angeles, won three service ribbons and 4 battle stars from the Department of the Navy. If you look at this picture now, you're going to she was a female, still in her little naval uniform with her little hat, and she's on a chair and she's got a telegram in front of her. That telegram is from the Department of the Navy, from the Pentagon. Pooley, in fact, was the longest living World War II animal. All the dogs, everybody else had died, even all the rest of the cats. Pooley was the last one. And every year on her birthday, the Department of the Navy would send her a telegram congratulating her, thanking her for her service, because it was remembered, and congratulating her for being the last remaining service animal from World War II. So really, these are extraordinary animals. Possibly the most heroic cat who ever lived was a British naval cat by the name of Simon the Able Sea Cat. And he is a big part of this book. In fact, he's He's the last piece in chapter 4. Simon the Able Sea Cat may have been the most heroic cat who ever lived, and perhaps the finest nautical cat as well, who, again, you'll have to read the book to get the full story, but Simon pretty much saved a British gunboat. The HMS Amethyst in 1948 was ordered up the Yangtze River, so this is after World War II, but there was still a lot of unrest in Asia. The communists were taking over China, and the British government had ordered this gunship up the Yangtze River in order to evacuate the British embassy in Nanking. One problem, the communists ambushed the ship, left it nearly destroyed on a riverbank, and the British couldn't rescue it without risking an international war. Well, this cat, who started out as a dock cat in Hong Kong, and they brought this cat, Simon, on the ship, only hoping he'd be able to catch rats, winds up saving them. Because they're stranded for 3 months and they can't get reprovisioned, and rats start to invade the ship, Simon single-handedly not only chases all those rats out of the ship, but Simon becomes like the ship's morale officer, going around checking everybody every day. The ship rallies around Simon. The crew kind of takes Simon as their new leader after the captain is killed. He becomes, like I said, a source of pride and morale. Every time Simon would kill a rat, they would have a big celebration on the ship, these poor sailors. And eventually, when they patch their ship up and sail out, Simon becomes the first true celebrity cat. You've probably never heard this story among the great battle stories and among the great heroes, but this was a great, truly great hero who was a feline. His biography, and I have a copy here, very rare. This is the biography of Simon the Cat, was written after the ship returns to England. And it's filled with these wonderful pictures of Simon and Simon in action, some of which we have reproduced in the book. So here's Simon, if you can see this. The book's really falling apart here. Here's Simon with one of the sailors. Simon becomes this incredible worldwide hero, truly the first what we would consider viral cat. As they are sailing back to England, every port of call they stop, and there is a huge bag of mail and cat treats and toys sent all around the world for this incredible cat, Simon. So she reveals his story as well, and including, I hate to say it, you'll find out, including his tragic passing when they get back to England that leads to him being in this grave. A truly incredible, heart-lifting, and also tragic story. Cats had also not just served on ships. I said cats had served militarily. Well, cats had been serving with the army way long ago. They started with the Roman legions. Did you know this? That the Roman legions would invade Northern Europe with cats. Why? Again, to protect their supplies. Northern Europe didn't have cats at this time. So we talk in the book about how cats migrated up the Danube with the Roman legions. They made it all the way up to England with the Roman legions. When the Roman legions got pushed back, these cats stayed in England because the British found them to be so valuable and were so impressed by these domestic cats who had not been in England before, that the British would take these cats that had been at Roman forts, and that's how cats kind of become very popular in England initially as well. So they start out marching with the Roman legions, and there are some very great heroic names in military history who are feline. This is Crimean Tom, another cat that Baba will tell you about in the book. During the Crimean War in the 19th century, the French and the English had it. They were through. They were trapped in Sebastopol, and they were going to be starved out by the Russians. Well, this cat, Crimean Tom, who is taxidermied in the Imperial War Museum in England. Crimean Tom winds up, he's a Ukrainian cat, and he is a Ukrainian patriot, and he wants nothing to do with those damn pesky Russians. So he takes these English and French soldiers, and he shows them these starving soldiers, and shows them where the Russians have hid a bunch of supplies, and not just food, but also military supplies, artillery, and he winds up saving those troops. And after the war, they take him back to England to live as a hero, and as I said, he's taxidermied in the Imperial War Museum, a very heroic cat. Here's Baba as a Union soldier. Did you know we have a very long history? Again, we spend a lot of time talking about this in the book. We have a very long history of military cats in the United States as well. Uncle Sam's Cats, this is a 19th century newspaper article, and the government had employed cats in the army, cat garrisons, again, to patrol for rats and keep things safe. Here's an interesting fact for you. Those people who think of especially dogs and horses as animals of war. Did you know that the United States had a cat service? It had military cats before it ever had a dog service. It didn't even have a dog service until World War I, but it had cats. It had cats in the army, and it says here in this article, every cat was apportioned $18.25 a year for its care. So it wouldn't have to, eat just rats. So it would have beef and things to eat. Being an army cat wasn't easy. This is my favorite army communique ever. Army cats better obey orders. Being in the army as a cat was a real deal. Army cats had better start obeying the regulations or they'll be sorry. Cats not in quarters between 7:30 p.m. and 6:30 a.m. at Fort J. Governor's Island will be kicked right out of the army and into the SPCA pound, the commanding officer ordered. I don't know, I bet they kicked a lot of cats out of the army, but those cats who were in the army, those military cats, as I said, they really served. It kind of defies our understanding now of what a domestic feline is, because we really require so little of them, not understanding what the amazing things that they're really capable of. One of these army cats, you want to talk about, a famous cat. The most famous cat in the history of the United States Army, his name was the Colonel, and that was also his rank. He started out, his name was Major, and he was a Major, and then they promoted him to Colonel, so he's Colonel. He was titularly in charge of the United States Army Cat Service. Like, I don't know what he does. He was stationed at the Presidio in San Francisco. I don't know what he does if some cat in Illinois is misbehaving, but technically all the cats in the army served under this cat, the Colonel. He served during the Spanish-American War, America's highest-ranking military cat, because he was considered the best mouser the army ever had. And if you think that all of this is really some vast joke, it's really all to be funny, I'll tell you a story. So, Spanish-American War is when the United States took the Philippines. And so, because the Spanish had owned the Philippines up to that time. And so these American troops wind up in the Philippines, and they're having a huge problem with rats, massive problem with rats eating their stores, really big problem. And they get a bunch of Philippine cats, and they said the Philippine cats can't do it. They can't combat this rat problem. So they send 4 of the Colonel's kittens, these special army cats, raised to be army cats and raised to be mousers, these big, tough American cats. They send them to the Philippines to kind of take charge of this situation and get the rats under control. American cats at the time were so esteemed. And here's another tidbit of history, and we talk about this in the book, a remarkable tidbit of history. Now some of you may know this from military history, the first time American troops ever go to Europe is in World War I. But the first troops, I bet you don't know this, the first American troops to ever be deployed in Europe were not human, they were feline. This is true, because after the United States joined the war, the British sent a contingent to the United States and said, well, we know it's going to take a while for you to get your army together to get over to Europe to serve, but in the meantime, can we get some of your cats? Why the American cats? Because like I said, some of these cats were bred to be so big and so tough, and they were having this massive rat problem in the trenches that the English and the French cats couldn't combat, that they actually sent American cats over, dock cats and port cats, from New York and Baltimore, who were considered to be the baddest of the bad, to serve in the trenches to help out our allies. That's right, the first American troops to ever go into battle in Europe were not human, they were feline. Here's a cat and Iwo Jima, World War II tank cat, picture of him. Here's the weirdest mission that any military cat has ever been sent on. Sent from Pennsylvania, a black cat, to the RAF in England to fly on a British bomber back and forth across Europe until it had crossed the path of Adolf Hitler, and apparently by that method it cursed him. Anyway, this does sound a little bit outlandish, I will admit, but then again, the Germans did concede before the Japanese, so maybe we have a cat to thank. Talking about flying cats, here's another role historically felines have been denied, and another really big hero in our book that Baba discusses. Another big hero for her is Felicet the space cat. Now, of course, the Russians had been working with space dogs like Laika and Belka and Strelka, and they're famous and they're still remembered to this day. The Americans were sending chimps into space. Ham, for instance, the first American animal sent into space, is buried in Alamogordo, New Mexico. But what people forget when they think about these early pioneering space animals is there were cats too. The French had a space program, and instead of sending dogs and instead of sending chimps, they sent cats. And the space cat, their astro cat, was a cat from Paris by the name of Felicet. C'est la vie, space cat, vive la Felicet. Felicet flew, and if you're wondering, was Felicet really an astro cat? Did Felicet really go into space? Well, I'll tell you, if you think the early American astronauts were cats, well, I wish the early American astronauts were cats. If you think the early American launches were piloted by astronauts, then you better credit this cat as well, because this cat went as far and as high as those early Mercury American spacecraft. Yes, Felicet did go into space. Here is Felicet in her holder being placed in the capsule. Felicet was an alley cat from Paris. And so the French space program had gathered together a bunch of stray cats and given them all tests to see who was the most calm, who was the most intelligent, who was the most capable, who was the most adaptable to differing situations. And Felicet won this contest and becomes this flying astrocat, took off from Algeria, landed in the Sahara Desert, and I'll tell you, unlike the first Russian space dog to go into space, Laika, who died and never returned, Felicet did return alive, was picked up by the French in the Sahara Desert and taken back to Paris as a hero. But again, so many of these stories forgotten. So much of feline history kind of erased, as if cats really weren't there doing all these amazing things. Did you know? Here's something we don't see in the cowboy movies. Did you know about felines in the American West? Here's Baba as Calamity Jane. Cats had a major role in the Wild West. Frontier cats. Here are a couple more of Baba as a frontier cat. And again, she narrates this history in the book. The frontier may not have been won without cats. Yes, it was won by big, strong, brave humans, but they had cats at their side as well. And again, it was their ability, in particular, to catch mice and rats and protect stores from vermin that made them so incredibly valuable. Cowboys, you don't see this in the movies, but cowboys would often travel with cats. They would travel with felines. The reason being, cowboys might go out in the field for 3 months at a time, right? A very long time away, and they had to pack in their stores on their horse. And of course, at night, it was possible that rodents may get into those stores. So having a cat with you as a cowboy was the one sure way of making sure that your food was going to be protected. Was this just a small thing? Were these cats really such a big deal? Judge it by the economics. In the 1880s, in the Arizona territory, the set price for any cat at all, if you had one to sell, was $10. That was the standard price for a cat. Now, $10 in the 1880s was like a month's salary for a lot of people, but there were so few cats in the Wild West at the time, so few cats along the frontiers, and there was such an incredible need for them. There was there was an entrepreneur who was shipping cats to the Dakotas, again, to serve on the frontier. This guy was buying up stray cats on the East Coast and in the Midwest. So he would pay anywhere from like a quarter to 50 cents to $1, depending on the size of the cat and its perceived abilities. And then he'd ship them up by train to the Dakotas. This guy had sent 3 entire train loads up to the Dakotas of cats to sell them to ranchers, and he would triple his money or more on every sale of a cat. Yes, they were that necessary and that important along the frontier. As I said, the frontier may not have been won without these cats along for the ride. Another famous role, a very important role that early cats served was in Hollywood. And of course, when we think of early Hollywood and we think of films, we think in particular of dog movies like Rin Tin Tin, and we think of the Westerns and we think of the horses. We don't realize that cats were a part of that as well. Again, it's another bit of history that they've kind of been denied, but something that they were a part of. This is a casting call for a movie where they're looking for black cats. Early Hollywood did not believe in cats. It was thought that cats were untrainable, that you could use dogs for the screen and some other animals, but you couldn't ever get a cat to cooperate. Well, little did they know that in the 19-teens, a cat would come their way to prove that was wrong. This cat was named Pepper. Now, Pepper was a she. It says on that sub-headline there, his salary. Pepper was actually a her. It was her salary. Max Sennett Studios, back in the day, in the early days of Hollywood, was in the Echo Park area of California, so it wasn't even in Hollywood itself. And Max Sennett Studios was one of the big Hollywood studios. And they also used a lot of animals, but they had never used a cat because they thought they were untrainable. A mama cat had given birth to a litter of cats underneath their soundstage. And one of these kittens gets a little big and a little daring, Pepper, crawls up through the floorboards and kind of pops herself down onto the stage. And these guys are working on the stage and they're like, "Well, take a look at this thing. This cat thinks it's part of the crew now." And someone says, "Turn a light on it, see what it does." Doesn't flinch. Then someone said, "Hey, roll some film of this cat." And I've seen this piece of film that was run as a test of Pepper, and it's intoxicating because it's this little kitten with this stubby body and this almost like an opossum's tail, this stubby little tail kind of gamboling about playing with a string. You can watch it over and over on a loop. And again, it's just this cat has it. It has the it factor. And so they realized they had a cat with an incredible stage presence and a cat that was able to act on screen. So Pepper winds up becoming the very first movie cat. Pepper goes on to have 17 credited roles in her life, and that's actually a lot. Credited roles. Now remember, this means that you're actually on the marquee. You're actually listed in the credits. You're on the bill. You're cast for a role. That was a big deal because, if you just had a horse standing in the background or an animal standing in the background, you wouldn't credit 17 credited roles, including the first credited role ever given to a cat. Over on the left of your screen, you'll see a couple film stills. It was a movie called The Little Hero, the first credited role ever for a cat. Now, Pepper was not the hero. Pepper was actually the little villain in the film. The film starred a dog named Teddy the Wonder Dog, and it was a story of a woman who had a cat and she had a bird. Cat, of course, played by Pepper, and she's going out for the day, and she tells the cat, "Hey, I'm going out to do some errands. Do not try to kill that bird. You better behave." Well, we know Pepper's not going to behave. Pepper starts trying to get the bird, and the bird is calling for help, and all the animals come around wondering what they can do to save the bird from this cat. And Teddy the Wonder Dog comes by and looks in the window and sees this bird in peril and goes and gets all the dogs from the neighborhood, and they rush in and save the bird's life. And then the woman thanks them and tells the cat, "Oh, hey, you're very naughty." But it was the first credited role ever for a cat. And I have the magazine cover you're seeing over there from Picture Show. I owned the original magazine. It was the first movie magazine cover ever dedicated to a cat. Famous stars that draw no wages. Well, yeah, I guess that's true too. They didn't get paid much. They were animals. But the first movie magazine cover ever given to a cat, given to Pepper, who really was a big star. Here is a playbill, again, Senate Studios down on the farm, and all the animals who played in it are listed, including Pepper the cat. So 17 roles in her life. Now, Pepper was a groundbreaker as a movie cat, but she never starred in a feature length. All of those were shorts. But cats did also have a role in Hollywood features and starring in Hollywood features. One of them, That Darn Cat, the Disney film in the 60s, starred a rescue cat by the name of Sin, a cat that had been abandoned by its owner. It's interesting because a lot of these famous cats, they're strays, especially in the movies. All the famous cats were strays that had been picked up off the street or out of a pound or showed up like Pepper. This movie in the 1960s became one of the biggest cat film of all time, but the greatest movie cat ever, if we're on this subject, again, we don't really think of cats in movies, but they've had a great role. The greatest film cat ever is a cat by the name of Orangey, and again, there's an entire section in our book in which Baba narrates the history of film cats. Now, Orangey, you may know him if you've seen the movie Breakfast at Tiffany's. He's the orange cat in that movie, but what you didn't know about him is fascinating. Orangey is basically the Marlon Brando of cats. An incredible actor, a long career, multi-award winning, and really a big eccentric. Orangey, here's a press shot of Orangey pitching cat food. Orangey, Breakfast at Tiffany's is 1961. Orangey's career had started all the way back in 1950. Paramount Studios was trying to make a film called Rhubarb. And I actually own a lobby card from Rhubarb. As you can see on the lobby card, there's a really big orange cat on it. That orange cat is our buddy Orangey. Paramount was trying to make a movie about a cat that had, when an eccentric rich man who owned a professional baseball team died, he left the baseball team to a cat. So they were gonna make a cat film, the first ever feature-length film starring a cat called Rhubarb. Rhubarb was the name of the cat in the film. And Rhubarb owns a baseball team, except this means that they need a cat. They need an acting cat who can pull off an entire feature film. Anyway, the caprice of the film is that Orangey, this cat that owns the baseball team, Orangey is a street cat. He's in particular like an alley cat that this guy had liked. And they were trying to cast, they were trying to cast this film, and it can't get made if they don't find a cat, right? They don't find the right cat. And they had talked to all the animal trainers in Hollywood who had brought in, really nice cats because they're animal trainers. And Paramount kept saying, no, this isn't the kind of cat we want. We want a mean cat. We want an alley cat. We want someone who can realistically pull off that role. And so they put an ad in the paper. They were so desperate to try to make this movie and find their cat. They put an ad in the paper that literally said, wanted for role in feature film, mean scar-faced cat. And there was a woman in California, in the San Fernando Valley, just outside of Los Angeles, who had this big, mean orange cat that was living under a bush in her house, outside her house. She's like, I don't know, he's really big and he's really damn mean. And the cat would let her touch him, but no one else. And so she's like, he's just a big brute and a big battler. It sounds like the kind of cat Paramount wants. And so she got this cat in a box somehow, this monster, drove it down to Paramount, and Paramount's like, yes, that's our exact cat. So they cast this film in Rhubarb. Rhubarb bombs. It's not the fault of the cat. The cat was actually really good. It's just a stupid movie, right? It's a movie about a cat who owns a baseball team. But the cat was so good that he won the first ever acting award by a cat. At the time in Hollywood, they had something called the Patsy Awards. The Patsy Awards were the animal version of the Oscars. They were actually planning an entire walk of fame of animal actors, animals who had won this yearly award for acting, the best animal actor of the year. In the end, they never built the Wall of Fame, but the panels that were for it still survive. They're in Burbank, at the Burbank Animal Shelter. And so each panel would be two separate pieces. It would be the name of the film, the year, and then a separate piece with the animal's paw prints. And so he becomes the first cat ever to win an acting award, and then for Breakfast at Tiffany's wins a second Patsy Award, the only animal ever to win two. Not even the famous dogs had won, none of the famous dogs had ever won two of these Patsy Awards. So again, an incredible story, another incredible cat, and a history that you just don't hear about felines, their importance in Hollywood, for instance. I want to, pretty soon, we're going to hold things up to break for questions, but I want to talk about one last thing that is in the book that has fallen out of history that is really special and important. In 1950, a cat by the name of Clementine Jones, her family had moved from Dunkirk, New York to Denver, Colorado, and left Clementine behind. Now, they weren't being mean. The reason they left Clementine behind is because she was pregnant. They thought that moving across the country would kind of be bad for a pregnant cat, so they left her with a relative. Well, Clementine gave birth to her kittens and then decided, okay, my kittens are on their own now. They're big enough now. I'm going to find my family. And so in 1950, Clementine leaves New York, and everybody thinks Clementine's dead. You know, they're like, well, Clementine left. Clementine, we don't know where she is. She must have run away or gotten hit by a car. 4 months later, 1,600 miles later, she shows up at the doorstep, the right doorstep, the doorstep of her family in Colorado, a city, a state, and a house she had never seen in her life. She found them from the other side of the country. And a pet food company in California decides to give her a medal. It's called the Puss in Boots medal, and I actually own an original Puss in Boots medal. If you can see that, I'm holding it in my hand. The Puss in Boots Bronze Award for Feline Honor and Merit. And this pet food company that puts out Puss in Boots cat food decides, whoa, this is such a special story. We need to give this cat a medal. And so they introduce a medal not just for this cat, but a medal that will be given out for the next decade until they're bought out by Quaker Oats. And Quaker Oats does not apparently see the wisdom in giving medals to cats and discontinues the program, but they will continue to give out medals to cats who do special things in America for the next 10 years. And some of these stories are absolutely extraordinary. And this medal, again, it's totally forgotten now. It's not even on Wikipedia. I don't know if you'll even find anything on it on Google except an article that I have written, but it's so important in feline history. Again, as I said, maybe the theme of this talk, how much of feline history have we let slip? How much have they been denied of this really, truly fascinating history? It's part of the reason that we had to write this book. But anyway, so for the next decade, this medal is given out to cats who do extraordinary things. And one of the effects of it, because up until this time, up until the 1950s, especially in America, cats had always been second rate to dogs. Always dogs were number one. And cats were, you know, it's like a little bit eccentric and maybe a kind of pathetic pet to have. But the stories of these cats, as they give out these medals across the nation, the stories are so profound and so touching that it really upgrades the cat to the American public and brings the cat to where they are now on an equal level with dogs as faithful companions. Here's a wonderful story about a cat who had won one of these Puss in Boots medal. His name was Kitty Billy. There was an aged dog that was soon to pass at a plantation in Louisiana, and this dog had gone blind. This cat was a stray, and one day they let this blind dog out to kind of wander around the yard, and it couldn't go far because it couldn't see. And this stray cat comes to the yard, starts pushing the dog along, and helps it walk, and helps it cross streets, and takes it around so it can get exercise, so it can live a little bit instead of feeling like it's dying. And every day, this seeing eye cat, every day Kitty Billy waits outside the door of this yard until they let the dog out, the blind dog. And the cat walks with the dog and helps it. It becomes its seeing eye cat, making the last part of this dog's life something livable and something that it can enjoy in the presence of another animal companion. An incredible story of compassion. So Kitty Billy gets one of these medals. Chicky, who was a cat at San Quentin prison, got a medal beloved by the prisoners. The prisoners had made these little cars and beds and a little toy piano for this kitten that lived at the prison. Chicky gets a medal, and it says on the medal, "Thank you for brightening the lives of 2,000 prisoners." A cat that was beloved by many, many people. Torrance, California once had a cat who ran an election polling station named BB, gets one of these medals. Another really beautiful story. In Joplin, Missouri, a mother opossum had been hit by a car and killed, but it had babies in its pouch that were still alive. Well, without its mother, these opossums are going to die. They are rescued by a cat who takes in the baby opossums as her kittens and raises them and nourishes them and protects them as if they were her little cats, and wins one of these medals too, and in addition becomes the poster cat for Be Kind Animal Week for showing the kind of humanitarian gesture that animals, and especially cats, are capable of. So anyway, that's some overview of the book, a little bit on a microhistory of some of the cats that we get into in the book, some of the stories that we narrate in Baba's voice, and she would love to tell them to you if you want to purchase the book. And otherwise, Alex, why don't we take some questions if we have any? Because I think we've got about 10 minutes left.
Yeah, sounds good. Hello again, everybody. We do have a few questions in the box, but if you haven't submitted one yet and you would like to, please feel free. So first of all, we do have a couple of people who are wondering, first of all, how did Baba get her name? And second, Laura would like to know how long it took her to recognize that it was her name.
Ooh, well, when I got her out of the pound, and I actually, in the book, there's an afterword from the human, and I kind of talk about how I found her and a little bit of our history together. When I got her, she was a rescue kitten, and she didn't have a name. She only had a number. I don't know in the end that animals really care about names, and I'm pretty sure they don't. She had gone through a whole litany of names that were all very similar when I first got her. Baby, Bobby, Baby Ganesh, Baba Ganoush. She just kind of ran Baba Yaga, and just ran the gamut of these phonetically similar words, and eventually it just became shortened to Baba. My opinion, when it comes to cats and names, I don't think they actually recognize the word. I think they recognize the tone of voice that you say. Because if I say, if I can perfectly emulate the way I talk to her and call her cigarette, I think she'll turn around and listen. Because she's more, I think, that's my personal opinion. I think they recognize the tone. It's more an empathy with you than it is the actual words, but that's my opinion. Were there more questions?
Yeah. Kat would like to know, are there still cats on naval ships, cruise ships, or anything else?
Yeah, yes, to an extent. I actually know some guys, because I've done separate talks just on naval cats. And I did one for the Navy once. It was one of the funnest talks I'd ever done. It was on an aircraft carrier. A family day on this old aircraft carrier that's now a museum, and it was really great. Because those guys are really into it because they know naval history and they love this stuff. To an extent, yes, but they're more like a token thing. Like a lot of guys who are sailors or who still sail, like can kind of do those like pirate reenactments. A lot of those guys will have cats on the ships. Not so much anymore. Cats started getting kicked off the ships in the 1970s. And they got kicked off the ships because they wanted to use modern methods of pest control. And actually, we do talk about some of that in the book as well, about cats being on the ships and then eventually getting kicked off. In a previous draft of the book, I really went into it, but for editorial reasons, we couldn't carry too much. There was a famous British ship cat named Fred One Pound. And Fred One Pound had sailed some massive amount, it was like over 500,000 miles. And he was the last great ship cat. He was a British ship cat who had lived this crazy life of adventure with his crew. And by the 70s, he got kicked off too. They want to kick them off, as I said, because they consider it, the landlubbers consider it to be archaic and pointless to have animals on deck, and they believe that animals can carry food or whatever. I think the sailors at the time were probably not too happy about the cats getting removed. There is a funny story not about the ship cats getting removed, but remember I talked about cats in the army and how they served commissaries protecting the food in the stores. The first nation to try to get rid of cats from the army was Germany. And there was one point in the, I forget the exact date, either late 1890s or early 20th century. It's to get rid of all the commissary cats in the army, and instead they're going to use chemical means. And their chemical means were to release a certain strain of cholera in the area where they're keeping the food to try to poison all the vermin. Let's see. Let's release a strain of cholera where we keep our food. That's a really great idea. It didn't take them long to get the cats back. So it was only in the 1970s where they really started getting rid of them, where I guess pest control methods were advanced enough that you could really trust them better than you could expect a cat to perform.
So that actually leads nicely into a question Matthew has, which is, are there any jobs, military or civilians, that cats are doing right now?
Currently, not to my knowledge. The Russians, though, did, and I don't know if they're still doing this. This is not in the book, and it's actually, there's a particularly sad part of this. The Russians had for a while used cats to sniff out a smuggled caviar, because there was a certain kind of caviar that that it was illegal to. I'm not sure if the problem was importing into Russia or exporting it to Russia, but there was a certain kind of caviar that it was illegal to either import or export. And it was a very valuable kind of caviar, and they didn't want people messing with it. And the cats were thought to have because caviar is fish eggs, and the cats apparently had a much better nose for detecting this kind of caviar than dogs did. And there's a terrible story, but I'll tell it to you. Gee, thanks, you're telling us a terrible story. But one of these Russian cats that was kind of a border agent for the caviar was actually assassinated by the Russian mafia. They had put a hit on this cat because this cat was so good at detecting caviar that they put a hit on this cat and had this cat killed. So these cats were really effective at that job. Yeah.
Wow.
Good news for the cat.
Yeah. I guess every job has its perils. Jillian would like to know if you have a favorite movie starring a cat or about cats. And before you answer it, I want to throw out there that the original That Darn Cat with Haley Mills is perfect.
I think that is probably the best cat film. And to say something more about that film, because I just threw it in, the year it came out, that movie was big. Because I went back and looked at box office receipts. When that movie came out, that movie beat Sound of Music and Thunderball at the box office that first week. And that's really saying something, because those are two, Thunderball's maybe the quintessential James Bond movie, and Sound of Music is one of the most popular movies of all time. So maybe that movie for sure. Bell Book and Candle has a Siamese cat in it that's really also magical, if you'll pardon the pun, because it's a witchcraft movie. But that cat Sin, who was in That Darn Cat, the original with Haley Mills, and I showed the slide of it. That cat had been abandoned by a guy to an animal shelter in Ontario, California, so right outside Los Angeles. And the guy brought the cat in and complained that he complained that the cat acted too much like a cat, and he didn't want it. I was like, well, yeah, maybe you shouldn't have a cat. And an animal trainer had gone in there and met this cat. And this cat was very small and not in good health when he found it. It was suffering. It was ill. It was underweight. It was undernourished. But he really saw something in this cat and really believed in it. And so he adopted this cat, taught it a few tricks, and then Disney.
I think you're frozen.
Won the Star of That Darn Cat, which becomes, it's like, talk about from fleas to finery, right? Winds up becoming the star of the greatest cat movie ever and this box office sensation.
It's a really wonderful movie. I think, talking about Sound of Music, I think I watched them probably an equal number of times, but something about that cat is more thrilling.
It beat it at the box office at first week.
Yeah.
Sorry, Julianne. I've always wondered, what the guy who gave up that cat thought. Like, his cat's out partying with Haley Mills, and that cat's picture was in on all these magazines, and this guy's still back in Ontario smoking meth or whatever, because that's what they do in Ontario. You blew it.
So we have a couple questions. I think we can get through, yeah, a couple of more. But we have a couple questions that are about you working with Baba. So Beatrice was wondering about real costuming versus Photoshop, and we have an anonymous question about working with her to do photography and how long she'll cooperate and how hard is it to get the perfect shot.
Well, I think we can answer both those together, right? Well, none of those costume shots are Photoshop. We won't do it, and I think that's what makes them good. It's like, ironically, people have said it's like, whoa, those photos are also perfect. They can't be real. It's like, if you think they're perfect, you better take another look. There's, even looking at the one on my screen, there are so many flyaway hairs in this wig, and so many, and the only thing I will ever do in Photoshop with the photos is, of course, adjust the levels and so forth, like things you would normally do in the darkroom, adjust the levels, and then I'll go in and, like, if there's a stray light, like blocking out one of her eyes or something, I'll clean that up. But none of those photos are Photoshopped. They're all real fabric backgrounds. Even the backgrounds I have to source down in the garment district or source via eBay or Etsy or something. And she wears all the costumes. I style all the wigs. I either make the costumes, or at the end, when the costumes got very complicated, I had a friend of mine who's a Hollywood costumer make some of them for me. She made like the last set of 8, I think it was, that we needed, really like the Napoleon and some really complex ones. Or the ones that I made, I would either make from scratch. Like this one that you're seeing on the screen, I actually made that out of old scrap velvet, just got a little mini quinceanera crown in downtown LA and put that on top of the wig. The wig is a 14-inch diameter doll wig. That's her size. And repurposed from old dolls or old teddy bears. There's an entire scene for collectible dolls and doll conventions and doll flea markets. And so I used to go down there and pillage through the cheap costumes to find costume pieces that I could resell for Baba. In terms of working with her, she's remarkably good. Like, she often has more stamina than I do. There were times when we would be working on a photo and she reads me, because she doesn't understand this role. She doesn't understand that French queen, and that is such a perfect photo. That it is such an icy royal stare. She doesn't understand that, but I do. So I've always kind of considered these self-portraits with me getting her to play the role that I envision. And so, it's really this exercise in interspecies communication where I find ways through gestures and so forth to convince her how to pose and what role to play. She's got a lot of stamina for it. Some of these photos we do really quickly. Like some of them, the Warhol one was remarkable because I'll set up the shoot. She does the pictures on a little box. I'll put the background up and I'll put her in the costume. And of course, I'll always take a test photo. In some cases, like the Warhol one, the test photo was so exactly right. I was like, oh, okay, that's it. Forget it. Just go play. We're done. In some cases, we really couldn't get it. And oftentimes it wasn't her fault. It might be my fault, or the background might not be hanging at the right angle. There might be other problems with it. And so there were times when I would just want to stop and take a break, and I would take, I'd take the wig off and I'd put her on the red, and she would jump back up on the box and glare at me like, no, I know we're not done. I know we're not done. And she would force me to continue till we had the photo I wanted. So she really is a bit of a taskmaster. Here, I know it's getting dark out here, and we should have turned on the light, but here, why don't we let them see it? Back where we started in the beginning, and put that in the corner. And she really knew where to go.
There we go. That's style.
She really is an incredible model. And, she, of course, we're always careful to have costumes that are not uncomfortable. The number one, the inviolable rule is that it has to be something that is comfortable with her, that she's able to do willingly. But as you can see, even here, with just sitting here wearing this pirate hat, she's good. She knows how to balance things. She knows the role of a model.
She's very good at her job. Let's see. So we do have a couple more questions. We're also at 8:02. So maybe.
Should I turn a light on in here, or are we?
I think we could probably do one or two more questions and then fade out in reality. And
So when the sun disappears, we're done.
so Lauren wondered if you could meet any cat in history, who would it be?
Me or her?
I think you could answer for both.
How about both?
Mm-hmm.
I believe, from my experience developing the character of the narrator with her as the muse, I believe that if she could meet any cat in history, it would be Trim, the navigating cat that I told you about. A real life of adventure and a bit of a mystery, because Matthew Flinders is jailed as a pirate, and Trim kind of just sneaks away and is never seen again. And Matthew Flinders was very concerned that maybe someone ate him on this island or something, but I don't think so. There's a bit of mystery as to what happened to Trim. I think Trim just found his way off the island and hit on another ship and just kept sailing for the rest of his life. So I would say actually maybe for both of us, Trim, solve the mystery and go on the great adventures with incredible seafaring cat. First cat ever known to have circumnavigated the globe, I might add.
He's doing better than most of us. All right, well, I think in that case we can end up with Megan's question, which I think wraps things up nicely. Why do you think this history of cats has been erased while we recognize the contributions of other animals?
I have an answer for that, actually, and I think it's quite true. One thing you will notice if you read the book is that from ancient times onward, cats were always gendered feminine, and it's something that is still with us to this day. Like if I were to say to you, hey, Alex, I have a friend who has 6 Dobermans, and I have a friend who has 6 Angora cats. Which is male and which is female? Almost everyone's going to think that it's the guy who has the 6 Dobermans, but it doesn't have to be. It's just that cats have been gendered feminine. Dogs have been gendered masculine for a very long time. So dogs kind of became like the heroic ones and cats the capricious ones. When you look at history, that's not true. It's who is the king of the beasts? It's not the wolf, it's the lion. And I'll tell you, I'll take a tiger in a fight before I'll take a wolf. So when on close examination, the gendering of certain animals, either feminine or masculine, really breaks down, but it's been consistent. And cats, in the book, it's pointed out that cats in the ancient world were associated with feminine goddesses, domestic goddesses. And this comes back to haunt them during the Great Witch Hunts. Why are cats the prototypical witches familiar? Because they were associated with the feminine sphere. They were so strongly associated with the feminine sphere more than any other animal. And since cats had been worshipped in the pagan world, and the pagans and the Christians turned on anything that was pagan, then they become associated with aberrant femininity, like women who would be associated with the devils. And you will see in the book that cats really suffered at that time. I mean, there were witch hunters in Europe who were trying to eliminate not just women who defied social convention, and because the witch hunts, make no mistake about it, were a battle against gender. They were also trying to eliminate the cats, and it is not a coincidence. It's because cats were associated with the feminine sphere. And I think that is right there, that is the reason why cats, just like famous women artists and famous women philosophers and politicians throughout time never got their due. I think that's the reason cats never got their due, because they were just associated with the feminine sphere, and so it was just unthinkable that cats would do these heroic things. And that's my answer to that question.
I think that's a great answer, and I have a feeling it resonates pretty closely with the audience's experiences of how people talk about cats every day. So I think that brings us to the end of our time and the end of our light. This was a really great talk, really wonderful to have you guys here.
I'm in the California desert, and the sun is very much setting on us right now. So from me and from Baba, thank you all so much for coming. And it is my greatest hope that you will enjoy that book, because that book is a labor of love. And underneath the history, that book really is a love letter.
And those will be going out as soon as book stickers and paws are all in one place. We'll be holding those and mailing those to you. So you should be seeing them soon, and we'll let you know when they are on their way. So thank you again, everybody. And thank you, Paul and Baba, for a great evening. Good night.